Hey everyone, welcome to the Unhandled Exception podcast. I'm Dan Clark and this is episode number 13. And it is a Friday too, but luckily not Friday the 13th, so we are all good. And today I am joined by good friend Dushyant Priyadarshi, and the main theme of the episode is going to be all about DevOps. So a massive welcome to the show, Dushyant.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, so could you give the listeners a quick overview of your background and what it is you're up to nowadays?
So I have been a software engineer. I would say engineer because I did start as a software system developer. Then I started doing a lot of DevOps work. And now I moved into more platform engineering. But my day-to-day work, I don't think it has changed a lot because I have been writing software and I'm still writing software. But being in platform engineering means I'm writing software mainly related to platform, and the development teams who I work with, they use the software. So it's a good place to be because you get the constant feedback from your users while you're writing code. And I think it's a place of privilege. Before doing this, I actually started my career working with Java and lots of NetBeans IDE and Eclipse. But then soon, I think around master's degree, I started moving more to .NET and C Sharp. And since then, I have just stayed with Microsoft technologies and currently working mostly with C Sharp, .NET and Azure, DevOps, CI/CD automation. So that's mostly my work.
So we actually used to work together at Sharp Life Science, which is a company that sadly didn't survive COVID. And we spent a lot of time together in Azure DevOps. In fact, actually, I should point out to our listeners that if either of us use the term ADOS, we're referring to Azure DevOps Services, which is what we used to call it. Quite a while ago, I put a Twitter poll out, and we discovered that we were in the minority of people that refer to it as ADOS.
No.
Yeah, I'll dig up that Twitter poll and include it in the show notes.
I do remember that tweet, and I was really surprised that few people agreed that it is not Azure DevOps Service. And I think few said it should be ASDO, which to me doesn't sound like an abbreviation. It sounds like a completely new name of a product.
I think that's what they refer to it internally in Microsoft. And I think a lot of people just say DevOps as well, which obviously is quite a loaded term. But I quite like ADOS. Maybe it's just because that's what we got used to using.
Yeah.
But it works. So are you still living in the land of ADOS in your new role?
Not really. I think so. You know how there is now a new push towards either ADOS or GitHub from Microsoft. So you should be choosing one of those if you want to work with Microsoft CI/CD systems. And the place I work, there is more interest, and I see there is more value as well in us moving towards GitHub. But currently, we are actually using Octopus and TeamCity. So TeamCity for all build, like CI testing and all those business, and then Octopus for our deployments. And for deployments, we work mostly with Azure Cloud. We do have other clouds like AWS and some Google resources as well, but that's minority. Mostly Azure, and all the deployments we're using Terraform at the moment. So that's essentially what we're doing. We have so currently I am quite far from ADOS. I don't see myself going back. I do miss it because I think compared to many other CI/CD tools that I've used, ADOS is obviously more than CI/CD. But in that perspective, compared to say Cruise Control, Jenkins, and few others, I think Azure DevOps is far mature. It has way too many features, which are really useful features, and I would hope GitHub meets that standard soon.
Well, I would definitely like to come back to like GitHub versus ADOS because I'm quite interested in knowing whether I should be moving my stuff over to GitHub instead of GitHub Actions. But I guess we should really start at the beginning and touch on what the term DevOps even means. I still tend to think of it from a technology point of view, as in just automate all the things. But I know it's really much, much more than that. How would you describe DevOps to someone that was completely new to it?
For DevOps, I think let's start a bit of the history of how it came about. It's about, historically in software, we had been essentially two separate groups or group of people working together or not working together. That's why DevOps came. It was Dev and Ops, which is developers and operations. So developers' job has historically been to create new features, to add features to our existing product. But the operation is to ensure how those features get delivered to the customer. How that, say, you design a website, how does it go to your customers? So in theory, Developers would always want change because they do like change. They want to add in new features. But at the same time, operations would prefer less of the change, the better, because that means they don't have to worry a lot about things going wrong because it's more deterministic. And again, historically, there has been a gap between these expectations of both the groups, and there has been a wall between them. This is like a hypothetical wall, which is like there is not enough communication. So the concept of DevOps came along saying we need to bring down this wall between dev and ops. We need to make sure that both these groups work together, understand each other, communicate more, and make each other's life easier. So that's essentially the theory behind DevOps. I do like how Microsoft defines DevOps, which I think the wording is like it's the union of people, process, and product to deliver value to your end user or your customers. And that does make sense because in the end, DevOps is a set of working practices. It's how you work to deliver the value to your customers. So for that, you need the right set of people. You need people who are okay to learn new technologies, okay to accept that you are a developer, but you also need to understand operational bits. Because without understanding how you're making life difficult for the next team, you won't be able to deliver. And the same for operation. They need to understand bits of development. I'm sure that it will never be 100% cross-functional team that everybody believes that we can be, but the understanding needs to be there. And I think the end bit is the tools and products of what you use and how you make it easier, like Azure DevOps, like we discussed, or GitHub Enterprise, or TeamCity, or anything else. Those help you automate, make sure that you do your testing, your security testing, your as long as there's an automation in place, you reduce that communication gap between both dev and ops. So that's essentially how I understand DevOps.
I think that was a very good explanation. I've definitely worked in places in the past where there's been that clear separation of a dev team and an ops team. And more recently, I think maybe because I'm doing more like cloud and web stuff, a lot of the teams I'm working with, all the developers are full stack developers and they're getting their hands in the DevOps side of things as well. But in those companies, I don't tend to see that many ops people. I wonder whether that's quite common or whether there's still a place. I'm sure there is because ops goes very deep. And that, I guess, from you mentioned security, from a security point of view, if devs are just have basic understanding on of DevOps and it's like, oh, I've got some GitHub actions, I've got some ADOS, we can just do it all ourselves. Whether we're actually introducing lots of security risks by doing that and not having these expert operational people.
I think so. Again, I have had the privilege to work in completely dev teams, and then also as platform engineering team now, I get to work with people who are real operational team members. So I can see a big difference between the knowledge and understanding of a developer, even a senior developer, a technical architect. They do understand things, but when it comes to practices, we still end up thinking like a developer, like we do want to deliver the change. But most often I've noticed it's the operation people who actually block or slow us down a bit in explaining why they should not be done. And many times I've noticed that's how we bring the downtime down or reduce the downtime. And that's why I think it's important to have a team with a variety of skills. Like obviously we do need devs to deliver the features. We do need operations. And from security perspective, like the company I work for now, security is very important. Like you cannot be issuing financial services if you are not following, say, PCI DSS compliance, for example. So in that case, the operations members who have worked in similar environment for a long time, they do understand the security issues. And there are things like, say, when you deploy an Azure function, you want it Azure AD authenticated. But our security team and our operations team, they're not a team. We're all one team now, platform team. So they will ensure that that's not where we stop. Azure AD is one thing, but on top of that, we should ensure that the other resources, our resources, are the only resources which are able to access it via IP allow listing or any other restrictions that we can apply. So it is just going above and beyond, making sure that there are no loopholes left behind. And for that reason, I think we do need a mix of multiple skill sets.
Definitely. I think and we can talk quite a bit about infrastructure as code as well, because you mentioned Terraform earlier as well. But all this security thing, if you've actually got it in source control, people with different skill areas can look at it and know that that is what's being deployed, rather than someone just going to the Azure portal and changing some settings. I think that in itself brings in such massive benefits for security.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very important to understand that although portal makes it very easy, that's probably not the way you should be doing it, because it's very unpredictable. When it has happened, I have seen cases where people have changed things in prod, but the trouble is the next time you deploy, Terraform doesn't know that you have changed it manually, so it will reset it back to what it thinks should be the right thing, and then you're back in square one because of the reason you wanted to set it in the first place. So yeah, I think automation, CI/CD, that's what we should be doing, at least in prod. In dev, obviously, we're trying out different things. Maybe at times we'll need to say change something, test something. But the moment it's ready, it has to be scripted. Terraform, ARM template, whichever is best for your team. That's how you should script deploy it and not manually change anything in prod.
I've definitely noticed a change in the way I do things too, where previously, if I was creating just a new project, I would start off manually creating it in the portal. Then I would change a few things, and like during development, it would probably be manual. Where now I find even from start, when I'm starting off something, I will start with that infrastructure as code, because I tend to have other projects where I've done the same. So I can literally copy and paste code snippets across
Yeah.
and then apply it. And it means it doesn't become technical debt. And I've got that consistency from the very beginning.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So I think once you have seen it work, I think the first time, let's say for the first time I'm deploying a Redis cache. In that case, I would possibly just go on the portal and try it out. But once I've seen what is the behavior I want, I would script it. And you're right, next time I'm working on a different project, I will never go back to the portal and do it, but I will deploy it again. Unless I'm probably working with one of the preview features and I want to try out and see what's going on there, then yes, I'll end up in the portal again.
Have you played around with ARM versus Terraform, and there's Pulumi as well?
Yes, ARM versus Terraform, yes, because that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. Pulumi, not so much. I can give you like rough theory around Pulumi. In theory, all of them, Pulumi, Terraform, ARM, even the new Bicep, all of them are working with REST API under the hoods. They are all just triggering Azure REST API one way or the other. And the good thing about ARM is that that's like as closest to Azure resources you are. So that's the payload you are submitting to the REST API, and that's what gets applied. So it's good from the perspective that you are almost getting the latest resource specifications from Microsoft website or from Microsoft documentation. You get the JSON and apply it. The difficulty I have, or I think many teams also have, and historically my current team has had as well, is that it's difficult to read and maintain JSON. It's very good for the machine to read it, but not for a human when it gets as big as, say, I have function apps, web apps, and few other resources together. So there Terraform comes in. So Terraform is really easy to read. I really like the way you can module things and share the modules among teams and all those things. But the difficulty here is state files. And state files, at least in a team where I work, we deploy probably 300 to 400 resources, all automated. And that point, when the state files get corrupt or go wrong, it is a major nightmare for us, because two things can happen. You could import those resources. So you can import straight from Azure to your state files and redeploy. But there are cases when people don't know that they can do that and they go ahead and deploy anyway. That point, it goes ahead and destroys resources because it says, okay, it's my state file is corrupt. That resource should not be there, so I'll remove it. So we do have controls in place to make sure that people won't be able to do it, but there are still some cases where people are able to do it. So that's a major headache for us. The second is security. The problem that I think many of us have with Terraform is that it keeps even passwords in plain text in state files. So that means we can never use, well, at least as a financial service company, we cannot afford to use Terraform Cloud, no matter what they say about their encryption business, until they can sign SLA with us, maybe. So for that reason, we have implemented our own infrastructure, which is keeping it in our own encrypted storage accounts inside of our company's Azure subscription. But that means there is an extra burden upon the platform engineering team to make sure that when we need access to the state files, how do we do it and how do we not do it? And more often than not, there will be teams that will need access because they want to deploy something new or they want to upgrade Terraform from 11 to 14, for example. So that's extra burden. So compared with Pulumi now, I like the idea of deploying resources from, say, C# or JavaScript or TypeScript, for example. That's a very good idea. But the state file concept is still there. So I don't see it being a major improvement in theory, because now Terraform is introducing CDK, which is, I think it's called the Cloud Development Kit, which is supporting JavaScript and soon to support C# as well. If one of those technologies can take the state file away or make it easier to work with state files, that would make it better option. I just realized that I read this somewhere. I haven't tried it out yet, but Pulumi keeps state files in an encrypted database or something, in encrypted storage. So that might be a better option if you are keen on using a state file based deployment technology. The other one that we are investigating right now is Bicep. So because we are mostly deploying to Azure, I think Bicep does sound like a good candidate to be used, especially when they don't have state files and you can convert. We have few of our deployments in ARM template already, and it says we can convert straight from ARM to Bicep and deploy straight to Azure. That will make our life much easier, but it depends how quickly we can try it out. And I think the 0.3 version is out, so we would like to try it out before going to prod with it.
I hadn't heard of the CDK that was being introduced in Terraform that you mentioned. Is that pretty much going to work like Terraform? Because you mentioned about C# SDK.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to work similar to Pulumi, where you can actually write code? As far as I'm aware, the differences between Terraform and something like Pulumi is Terraform's very desired state.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got some YAML file. Here's what I want my environment to look like. Where I've not used Pulumi, but as far as I understand, it's very programmatic. So you can have if statements and for loops and things. Does that mean that's the direction Terraform's going to go with this CDK?
That is the idea, actually. So I don't know how the management of marketing worked. Maybe they saw Pulumi coming across and they see there is a market there. But last I checked, CDK, you can write code in very similar manner to what we write in Pulumi. And I haven't tried if and for, but I've seen examples of those. So I'm pretty sure we can do that as well. And in the end, I think under the hood, it does the same thing. I think the code will still hook onto the Go Terraform core, and that will just trigger the Azure provider to deploy the resources. So in theory, we should be able to do what Pulumi is doing, but that's yet to be tried out. So last I checked, I think it was last year, October time, when they were showing the JavaScript, and C# was yet to come. So I'll have to double check if C# is here or not. Oh wow, I'm looking at it. They have actually now got support for C#, CDK for Terraform 0.1. Oh wow, they have support for Java. So now you can write in Java, Dan.
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm wrong. This is July 2020, so I must have heard this around that time.
There's TypeScript, Python, Java, and C# for this Terraform CDK. I didn't know this existed. This is awesome.
Yeah, so it turns out July 2020 is when C# was supported. That's very good.
You're giving me lots more things to read up on.
It would be good to try this though. Because at my work and even outside, I'm still using the DSL, the HashiCorp language. So it would be good to try out C# and other languages and see how they behave and if they make your life easier or not. But this looks very, very, very easy to use. I think my main beef with Terraform will remain that state file management. I really wish they can come up with a solution with that.
I guess that's going to be, for their caching, it's going to be a problem that if they get rid of it, that you can have massive performance issues as well.
Yeah, possibly. Maybe because Bicep can do it because they're only using ARM templates under the hood. So maybe that's easier for them. And given Terraform would remain multi-cloud, they would possibly always need the state file to keep the state.
That's a good point you mentioned there with Terraform and Pulumi versus using something like ARM, where ARM is just for Azure or Azure resources, where if you're using something like Pulumi, you might be using Cloudflare as well, or multiple cloud providers. And you can use the same way of doing infrastructure as code to deploy more pieces of your environment.
That I think is a valid point. But at the same time, let's say if you are a company, would you spread out across multiple clouds or would you focus on one cloud? Because I have seen debate on both sides and I'm yet to think what's the best one. But what's your opinion on it?
My opinion is pick the one you know the best. Again, I don't see the benefit of going like doing multi-cloud, but the example I gave before, I also use Cloudflare for some websites. So it's not necessarily just multi-cloud. You've got different kinds of things. So you might want to deploy some Azure resources, something in Cloudflare, an email provider like SendGrid, although Azure supports that internally anyway. But
Right.
it's not just are you using Azure and are you using AWS or Google Cloud. There's other things that Terraform supports as well. And just having that consistency of the way you write your deployment files is quite nice.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I've seen this debate on multiple podcasts as well as what is it? The videos we see on cloud, Google versus Azure or anything else. And there's sensible arguments on both sides. But one of the things I think is that if you are not scared of a lock-in, then you would be using more of a cloud and you'll be exploiting the more of the resources of the cloud. And by resources, I mean features of the cloud. But if you are more spreading across multiple clouds, means you will need to hire more people who know about that specific cloud. So you are possibly just increasing the cost by spreading across clouds. For your case, yeah, yes, that would make sense. If you have, say, one deployment doing one something in Cloudflare and the same time doing something in Azure, I don't know if Terraform does Cloudflare. Probably it does. If it does, then yeah, that's a win-win.
Oh, it does. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it does. Okay, that's brilliant news.
Azure is just one of the providers in Terraform, but they've got tons of other ones as well. So I think that's quite nice. But yeah, with the multi-cloud, I completely agree. If you're going to try and target lots of different ones, then you're potentially just going with the lowest common denominator of feature set.
Yes. Yeah.
But then they're all in competition with each other. So like you've got Azure Functions, you've got AWS Lambda. They're all looking at what each other are doing and trying to create a similar, because they're competitors, aren't they? So I don't think any of these big cloud platforms are going to go away like next year. So I'm personally not scared about being locked into one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm guessing maybe unless you are a big company, like not a company, big organization like NHS, for example, maybe you will have reasons to go with different clouds and different projects. But most companies would probably not need that unless they just see it as a way of hiring more people and getting them professional of different clouds work together and get it to work. But yeah, I think cloud lock-in, I don't see it as a major problem right now.
No, I agree. So I guess another point with DevOps is the whole concept of testing as well, where we've obviously got unit tests and integration tests. How does that fit into DevOps pipelines?
So, from testing point of view, first of all, when you said unit testing and integration testing, ideally they will all be automated. I think in UI world we still see quite a few manual tests, but apart from code perspective, it will all be automated N unit, X unit, or some kind of unit testing followed by integration testing. And if you are using Azure DevOps, ADOS, or GitHub, then we have steps, or are they called also in Octopus, they're called step templates. So essentially, there are steps in your build and deploy pipeline, which can run those unit tests and generate the output in desired format. It could be a TRX file or XML file, whatever we want as the output to be. So ideally, you would also be looking at the code coverage of your code when you're deploying your tests. But in the same time, it's my personal opinion, I find code coverage not to be a good indicator of how healthy your code is. It's more about feature coverage, is what I feel. But I don't know if there is a way to actually say you've covered all your features, except that you have lots of codes around anything that you've changed. In that case, yes, it goes back to TDD, doing the right test beforehand and then writing your code and then deploying using your pipeline. About testing, the other bit I wanted to add here is testing of infrastructure as code is also becoming more and more important. It has always been important, but because people or teams did not write lots of infrastructure as code, it probably wasn't that much important 2 3 years ago. Now with Terraform, ARM templates, it's vital because I could be changing a part of the Terraform code without understanding what it's going to do or what it's going to affect. So obviously, Go, the Terra test, the Go framework, it's a good way to test. So we in our team, we currently are looking at Go Terra test as well as thinking of writing our own NUnit based testing framework for Terraform, because in the end, all this Terra test is doing, as far as I've investigated, is that it will do the Terraform plan and check in the plan, the state file. Is it the expected output there or not? And then you can deploy that plan and then check on Azure if you have the right set of resources or not. So we could do the same testing using NUnit if we just deploy Terraform as a separate process and then check that JSON file has the right values. So that's one thing. But at the same time, about security testing, there is TFSec. So TFSec is an open source static analysis tool. So it doesn't really test it, but does analyze your Terraform code to find out, say, are you deploying web apps without HTTPS, for example, or any kind of security loopholes that you might have in your Terraform code? It will flag it straight away, and it's really easy to use because you can easily do it in a Docker. So in a Docker, I do actually have a post on this, that you can do TFSec scan inside a Docker image of your whole Terraform code base. And in the end, you'll just get a XML file, which can be NUnit XML. And then you can view it in any kind of deployment pipeline you have or build pipeline you have as NUnit output to see where your Terraform code might be bad for security.
That is so interesting. I've done a lot of unit testing and integration tests and UI tests and tried to put those in my pipelines, but I hadn't even considered testing my infrastructure as code deployments. So that's very cool, and especially with the security stuff. So we can definitely include links in the show notes to all these things we covered, but where would you say the best place is to go to learn all this kind of DevOps and Terraform and Azure pipelines?
The best place would be Microsoft Docs, because that's where you get the latest stuff. But again, learning is about doing, and I think only by doing you learn it faster and you understand it better. And the main motivation that I find to learn new technologies is take an exam, a certified Azure exam around it. And with Microsoft exams, and I think if you go for Microsoft Ignite event and even .NET Oxford, you can win free Microsoft exam vouchers. So that's really good motivation to go and take an exam. And the good thing about the exams is that obviously you will, once you're preparing for the exams, you'll start learning on Pluralsight. You'll probably go to, you can check on Microsoft YouTube channel and a few other places. In the same time, while you're learning for your own exam, I'm sure you will find lots more information which you find useful outside of the exam as well. And I realized that few of the exams I've taken, that has made me a better, say, a developer, even when I'm just learning about, say, Azure DevOps, because you can see where those principles come from, which are being applied in Azure DevOps. Or in the same time, I took the exam on Azure Security, for example, and there you can see why you would want to use Azure AD instead of creating your own database to manage user ID and user password. There are a few things that you will learn, or not few things, many things you will learn, which you will appreciate the exams more and more. And over time, I think it will make you a better developer, better engineer in general. Like, no matter, even if you're a manager, it probably make you a better manager, so because you'll understand the situation more with Azure and cloud and technology. So yeah, exams, I would recommend. That's probably the best way to learn right now.
Yeah, I remember when we were at Sharp Life Science, we had lots of discussions about the Azure exams, and you were going through your first one, I think, at the time. And in the morning at work, you would tell me that I was like studying for hours last night and doing all the practice exams. And then in my head, I was thinking, right, I'm going to go through and do these exams too. And that's kind of where I got up to be honest. I really need to. Like, I do lots of reading and learning and listen to podcasts and trying to keep up to date. But as you mentioned, there's lots of stuff, I'm assuming, by doing these exams that you just wouldn't know about without doing the exams, because podcasts and people's blog posts are always trying to talk about the new and shiny, not the fundamental things that's quite important to learn as well.
Yeah, it is a very good thing that if you are going for the exam, because you will learn a lot. And the trouble with many of the exams again is that I find the exam questions are sometimes outdated. So you would probably be answering something which is no more in use. That sometimes bugs me. I have raised it with MeasureUp and the exam provider from Microsoft. So I have raised it with them as well. But again, I guess they are always like a month, 2 months behind on what is on Azure. But in the same time, if you want to pass the exam, you would still want to answer in the outdated manner. But in the same time, it's quite good because the Microsoft exams, I realize, are not that easy. So if you just went ahead and took even the simplest exam, if you pass it, you're very lucky because they do make it hard to pass the exam. Starting from how they have set it up with the proctor, the person who is keeping an eye on you, or maybe that more than one person actually keeping an eye on you when you're taking the exam. In my case, I took the exam from home, so there will be a proctor, online proctor. So you need to get used to that environment as well to feel comfortable sitting that okay somebody's watching me through the camera the whole time and you can't be I don't know moving around or looking away from the screen. If you're thinking, think without looking at the window, for example, and all those things. And along with that, understand the technology because those questions are not straightforward like what does ATOS stand for. It will be a lot more like a case of a company doing something, how would you solve it for the company? So I really like those kind of questions where they actually test your understanding, not the fact that you just know a term. So overall, yes, I think it will be a good learning experience. And to start for the exam, you would possibly go through the Microsoft Learn process, which is a website with lots of gamified way of learning. So every time you finish a module, you get like points and things. And that's a good place to start because it will give you like sandbox Azure environments to try out different things. And you can just go mental and break things that's not going to affect anyone. And at the same time, because you're doing it, you're learning something extra on top of what you need to know.
Yeah, Microsoft Learn is so useful, and it's not just for exams. It's just if you want to learn, there's so many different learning paths and modules that it's just a great place to go to learn stuff. So I will again include a link to that in the show notes too. So shall we do dev tips?
I have two dev tips. One is for development in general. Like if you are a developer and you want to improve your skills, or maybe you are looking for a job, so this would be quite useful for you. So there is a website called dailycodingproblem.com. And what they do is every day they send you a new programming challenge or a programming question. And they claim that these are the questions from real interview questions from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and many other companies. It looks genuine. I haven't checked that, but the questions are really good. So it will be like testing your understanding of programming, your understanding of big O notations, the complexity of your algorithms, and it's one thing to just answer the question, but it's also important that you answer it with the best possible complexity, as in least the fastest possible execution time of the algorithm. So for that reason, I do recommend going through dailycodingproblem.com. And if you have free time, try out the really exciting problems.
Oh, I'm just going to have a quick look at that now. A daily coding problem.
The questions are really nice. They will have like two arrays and you have to do something with them. And how do you do it with big O n plus one or big O n without going to big O n square? But they don't share the solution straight away. And I think you have to be premium to find the solution.
Well, I'm on the website now and I am just going to
Sign up.
right, subscribed, done.
As a follow from that, I'm thinking of starting a GitHub where every time I get a problem, I'll try to answer it in GitHub. And hopefully others can come and improve that code saying, okay, your big ON is really bad, and then improve it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that'll be good. So my second dev tip is more Azure centric. It's about if you are a function app and web app developer, there is a button on your left panel which says diagnose and solve problems. That's your friend. And that does actually help you solve many problems. So if you are debugging your function app, definitely go through diagnose and solve problems and see like your configuration could be wrong. You could be pointing at the wrong storage account, or maybe you don't have a storage account at all. Are you restricting certain IPs which you should not be restricting? And Along with that, the other one is your App Insights Live metrics. So these two have saved me days, if not weeks, when I try to debug my function apps and web apps.
App Insights is amazing, and we could do a whole episode on. In fact, we probably will, but yeah, it's so good. So, well, if you've done 2 dev tips, I'm going to do 2 dev tips as well.
Nice.
My first one is actually a book. Well, 2 books to be exact. One's called The Phoenix Project, and the other's called The Unicorn Project. I don't know whether have you read them?
No, I have not. I still have the PDFs with me. I still haven't read it, though.
Oh, definitely recommended. So both of these are fictional books, but they're a story all about DevOps and a company called Parts Unlimited, which starts off with a very inefficient company with lots of problems across the board. And it's a story about how they grew to embrace DevOps and completely shift how their entire company works. One of the books is from an IT perspective and the other's from a dev perspective, but it's the same story told from 2 different points of view. So I would highly recommend reading or listening to both of those because they're both very, very relatable, and I'll include a link to those in the show notes. And my second dev tip is about code snippets. So this is like slightly off topic than the whole DevOps theme, but I would recommend having a place for all your code snippets and code notes. So I personally use Notion for this, which is coincidentally Matt Neal's dev tip in the last episode. Notion's pretty much like a wiki on steroids, but the choice of tooling is kind of up to you. Your IDE probably has snippet support too. I do personally prefer my snippets being outside the IDE though, because I have snippets for things that I wouldn't do in my IDE. For example, like command line snippets, step-by-step breakdowns, cheat sheets, notes, like all that kind of thing. And once you've coded something new, it's definitely worth taking a step back and stopping and asking yourself if there's anything generic about that code that you might want to do again, which could go into your snippet library or notes. Basically, would you want to do this thing again in the future? Because I find this saves me a massive amount of time. And it is surprising by how often we as developers repeat the same tasks again and again across projects, and quite often end up reinventing the wheel each time or re-Googling the same problem. So those are my dev tips. So before we wrap up, do you have anything else you'd like to mention?
I want to quickly mention the company I work for, New Day Cards in London. We are currently hiring. If you are looking for a job, please check our website, newday.co.uk, and get in touch.
And if you get to work alongside Dushyant, then I would recommend it even more. I remember when we used to work together, we always used to go to the gym at lunch times, and Dushyant's a great person to work with. I miss those days.
Thank you. Yeah, I miss those as well. Those gym punch bag music, that's really good.
Oh no, we'll be back. I'll have to find a gym. Like, I think I'm remote from now onwards, so we'll have to find like a training area midway between us.
Oh yeah. So I'm in Kent, Ashford. So
that's quite away. You've moved further away.
Okay, let's do Central London every weekend for training.
Maybe when COVID clears a bit.
Yeah. True.
Cool. So a big thank you, Dushyant, for joining us. It's been great having you on.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Nice. And thank you everyone for listening. A quick reminder that this podcast is sponsored by Everstack, which is my own company providing software development and consultation services. For more information, visit everstack.com. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please do help me spread the word on social media. I normally use the hashtag unhandledexception, and I can be found on Twitter at Dracan, which is DRACAN, and my DMs are open. And my blog, danclark.com, has links to all my social stuff too. And we will, of course, include links to all the things we mentioned today in the show notes, which can be found on unhandledexceptionpodcast.com.